Thanks everyone for coming back to our next edition of Econ Talks. Gareth, we've seen some really interesting new insights into how the regional economies are going over the last quarter of 2020, showing a much more upbeat path, I guess, for the economy.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that at a nationwide level, things have bounced back really well, but there's still quite a bit of divergence, isn't there, at a regional level between the ones that are heavily affected by the borders being shut and the loss of international tourism, whereas in other parts of the country, they're sort of trucking on like they wouldn't know that COVID was around at all.
Absolutely. We've seen that the divergence, in a sense, of how regional economies are performing becoming much starker in recent times. Like you say, some areas sort of moving forward like nothing's happened, others that are still feeling that bite, particularly from the loss of international tourism, and also just the shift in how New Zealanders are travelling to try and make up some of that loss. If we look at the areas that performed well, the latest Infometrics quarterly economic monitor for the December 2020 quarter indicating that parts of the eastern North Island, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, performing very, very strongly. A lot of fruit exports in that area, a lot of strong primary sector activity as well that has been shifting things forward, and I think highlights that area, that sort of primary sector, our export oriented sort of sectors are going to be quite key for the economy moving forward. They are an area that are going to also have to be supported because we know that there remain international challenges. At the other end of the spectrum, though, you've got the likes of Otago really, really struggling still with activity. That loss of international tourism has pulled down both the likes of Queenstown, but also some of the issues that we had for some of our other fruits exports. Not having enough people to pick them has also caused Central Otago a little bit of pain over the end of that December quarter. So, you know, some areas doing well, some areas certainly not feeling quite as upbeat at the moment.
And what about some of the urban areas? We saw, through the middle part of last year, Auckland being affected by the loss of international students and tourism as well. And obviously they've had a lockdown there through August and into September. And Wellington was looking a bit weak. What are the latest figures on some of those urban areas?
Yeah, the urban areas do remain still relatively soft. I think what we're seeing now is that, if you will, the top performing regions have that very strong primary sector focus. Those low performing regions, a much greater focus on tourism. And then sort of in the middle, you have the urbans, which are sort of going along all right. They've sort of got that bigger behemoth level momentum, but they're not sort of moving all that fast in a sense because there are fewer people around. People are working from home more. They're not spending quite as much. There are some limitations there. So those urban centres not performing quite as well. But what is interesting and related to those urban centres is what we're seeing in the tourism picture, because those urban centres, although there might not be a lot of people working there, there are a lot of people travelling from there. It's been interesting when we look at how Kiwis are travelling at the moment, a much greater focus on drive-based destination travelling compared to fly-based. Now, part of that's, cost, part of it's because you can be much more flexible with a car rather than a flight, and part of it's because people don't want to risk catching COVID-19 on a plane with a bunch of strangers. But it has meant that some of our tourism hotspots have changed in terms of who's actually performing best. We've seen that the likes of the Wairarapa, Northland, Wanganui, the Coromandel and Huranui district with Hanna Springs and similar are some of our best performing regions now in terms of that tourism activity, because Aucklanders, Wellingtonians and those from Christchurch are starting to move out a bit more. So that is quite a shift we're starting to see in the tourism world now, and provide some really exciting new opportunities for our tourism operators to reimagine just how they market themselves.
Any other industries sticking out apart from, we talked about agriculture, we talked about tourism, anything else which is really showing up in the numbers?
Construction's still a really, really firm part of a lot of different regional economies. They are starting again to make a lot of inroads there. There's more jobs coming through for construction. We're also seeing that health as well as the public sector levels of activity and certainly levels of job creation are pretty strong in those areas. What is interesting though is that there are again some of those emerging regional hiccups starting to come through. Some major employers in different parts that are becoming more compromised. We hear more and more about the likes of the refinery up in Northland and Whangarei, which might be changed to an import terminal, and that will cost a number of jobs. In recent weeks, we've heard of one of the mills in Whakatane that is not looking to continue. So all of those sort of major employers who might find themselves in a compromised position are certainly in a harder area.
Yeah, so I mean, gosh, a lot of highlights there to sift through, and a lot of stuff to keep watching, I guess, in terms of how those, particularly like you say, those major industries and some of the smaller areas, particularly, could be vulnerable going forward. And we know that in some of those towns that, there is a single employer and it can change the fortunes of an area quite quickly.
Absolutely, and we also know that although, again, that sort of broad path forward is relatively upbeat, we can't forget all those different shifts that different businesses are seeing, and that there are still a number of places, a number of industries, a number of employers that are doing it tough, and that is going to sort of provide a pretty uneven spread of economic activity throughout the year. Thanks, Gareth. Good to chat about these regional economies, and we'll continue to monitor them and update everyone at some point on one of our next editions of Econ Talks.